We'll get back to snow cleanup in just a moment, but amid all of the coverage of the weather yesterday, we barely got to mention this big news. The state approving the first ever licenses for retailers to actually sell recreational marijuana here in New York. About 3 dozen issued in all, but none of them close to us. That's because of that ongoing lawsuit that's freezing the issuing of licenses in several regions of the state, including Western New York, plus the Finger Lakes, even some Central New York areas. But the state's Cannabis Control Board also gave the green light for the final market regulations for cannabis, and that is something that will have a big impact on sales everywhere. Joining us live now is returning guest Joe Schafer, an attorney at Lippes Mathias who specializes in cannabis law. It is a new and growing industry, to use a bad pun, Joe. We appreciate you coming back in. Why was yesterday such an important day for adult use cannabis here in New York State? I know a lot of people maybe saw a headline or two, but amidst all the snow coverage, I think it got lost in the news.
Lost in the snow, I guess. Yeah, yesterday was a huge day. Honestly, probably the second biggest day in the history of the adult use program in New York State, behind when the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act was passed in March of 2021, because where the MRTA really set the framework or the skeleton of the state supply chain and the industry, the regulations released yesterday for the entirety of the adult use license really put some meat on the bones and give the restrictions and what's going to be allowed for these hopeful licensees in the market, which is super exciting. We've been waiting for these for a long time, since March of 2021, and now folks would have a much better idea as to what their businesses will look like going forward.
So now that draft regulations for these permanent licenses have been established, what is sort of the timeline for these permanent adult use cannabis licenses to actually kind of go into effect, I guess?
Sure. So because these are regulations and not a law, lawyer distinction, unfortunately, they have to go through what's called the rulemaking process. So they are going to be published in the state register. There's a 60-day public comment period, and the Office of Cannabis Management and Cannabis Control Board are significantly encouraging folks to give their thoughts on it. If you don't like something, they want to hear about it. Every member of the public has the right to comment on these regulations. So we have a 60-day public comment period. They have to read all the comments, respond to all the comments, maybe another 45-day period depending on how many changes. So realistically, in terms of licensing application rollout, we're looking at late winter, early spring of 2023, with hopefully licenses being awarded sometime after that.
So at the same time, we had this bit of a letdown for folks who have been waiting for legalization in our part of the state, right? We had this lawsuit that we've been talking about. It sort of put this pause on being able to issue them in this part of the state and a few other places. It's being challenged as unconstitutional. I mean, how is that going to affect the timeline here versus other places?
Sure. So the one distinction is that the licenses that are affected are the conditional adult use retail dispensary license, and these are for the regulations yesterday were for the permanent market. Again, distinction that I'm not going to dive into, but there's a few things that I think are important about the decision. Number one, from yesterday, the 36 dispensaries that the state licensed are going to allow delivery to any region in the state. So it may be a long drive, but if folks are going to be entrepreneurial in the other regions, they could, folks can order a delivery of cannabis products to their door depending on what the specific regulations are. And then we also, I believe it was filed today, the state is challenging the decision specifically where the decision enjoined allowing dispensaries in 5 specific regions, including Western New York. The state's hoping that they can trim that back to only the first ranked region that the gentleman who brought the suit was seeking to get a license in, which could free up another 4 of the regions. I don't know what his first ranked region was, but if that's the case and they are successful, this could open it up for 4 other regions, which is hopefully Western New York.
Joe Schafer is an attorney at Lippes Mathias, helping us understand, conditional licenses, permanent licenses, there's a lot going on. But again, 60 days for people to comment on these new rules that are coming out. Joe, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Michael.